Hi, I'm Rosalind Bertram. I'm the editor of Global Implementation Research and Applications. We have one, two, three of our associate editors. I don't see Tatiana yet, but I'll go into talking about the journal on my own. I'm a professor in the School of Social Work at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and I'm involved in a number of different things. But that's all. Let's introduce the associate editors, and then we'll get to know each of you. And feel free to talk about your research, why you're here, participants, why you're here, what you'd like to get out of this. Okay, Nancy.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nancy Koval. I work for the Center for Practice Innovations at Columbia Psychiatry. We are an intermediary organization providing implementation supports to behavioral health providers across New York State.
Susie. Just going across my screen this way.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Susie Breitenstein. I'm a professor and assistant dean for research at The Ohio State University College of Nursing, and prevention and implementation scientist. And I've been involved in the board since its inception.
Sue Kearns.
And hi, everyone. I'm Sue Kearns. I am a professor and director of transformative research at the Kemp Center for the Prevention and Treatment of Child Abuse and Neglect at the University of Colorado in the School of Medicine, and have been really involved in implementation science for, almost 20 years now. Currently the president of CERC as well, so kind of have friends too. But really glad to be here and really excited to see all of the interest in GIRA and publishing.
Zach, why don't we jump right into the PowerPoint so that we have plenty of time for discussion. I think the PowerPoint will answer some of your questions, and if not, we definitely want to make time for them. So next slide, please. This journal has been around since 2021. We purposely designed it so it is for any discipline, any region, sector, or setting. We invite submissions of their classic rigorous studies or reviews, but as well as, which a lot of you have interest in, implementation, applications, adaptations, also commentaries or reports. You'll see some examples in another slide or two. We provide a lot of support to authors. If you've tracked the journal at all, you'll see that we have publications from almost every continent, I believe. Certainly Africa, yeah, Latin America, Australia. Antarctica is the only one that I can think of. So language is sometimes an issue, and we provide a lot of support in our review process around that between the reviewers and the associate editors. Next slide, please. We try to make this as supportive as possible and as timely as possible. We've developed a manual, revised it in the second year for our associate editors, established timelines for ourselves, expectations for when things should be accomplished by. And we've been pretty good about working within those. What that translates to is the manuscript, I think, moves through to a decision much quicker. I think we're averaging 42 days, something like that, to making a decision. That doesn't mean 42 days to publication, just a decision on the status of the manuscript at that time. Next slide, please. I'm going to go quickly because I want us to have time to answer questions specifically. So as you can tell, with that broad of a definition of implementation, the act of carrying an intention of change into effect, we can cover a lot of ground, and we purposely want to do so. We want different disciplines learning from each other, different service sectors, different settings, and different global regions. We have administrators, educators, as you can see, a wide variety of readers and contributors. And in this process, we're trying to contribute to diminishing the research to practice gaps that occur. Go ahead, yeah. So a lot of the focus right now that we have is a lot on implementation applications. We're discussing and probably will move forward with developing a special issue on implementation applications. So those of you who are considering doing a submission, that might be a great place for it. We believe that implementation happens whether you're following implementation science or not, and there are lessons from that, challenges, successes, and failures. The practice and or the implementation of science in practice, it's mutually dependent. Next slide, please. Try and move fast. So here's some of the types of application submissions that we've had or we're seeking. Classic one is a case study. Some of you mentioned situations like that, where you critically examine the application of something, possibly a framework, a tool, use of digital technologies, etc. It's intended, the case studies are intended to provoke ideas, offer valuable lessons. We'll have a few guidelines in another slide about how this this could be best presented. Policy notes. I'd like to see more of these, frankly. Provide summaries of specific policy implementation concerns with recommendations, of course, of how to address them. With the intent of informing policymakers, foundations, intermediaries. You could have different audiences for this. Next slide, please. Research notes. We've published some research or evaluation protocols. I think we've published one preliminary result. These are intended to be incubators, laboratories for new thinking. Put your idea out there, get some feedback from the field. And then we have commentaries in which the authors can pose a question or offer a perspective about status of things at this time and what should we be thinking about, what should we be doing, what should we be looking at. So a wide variety of possible submissions. Next slide, please. I'll let you read that rather than me just read it.
And we'll be able to send a PDF of the slides.
I was about to ask, let's do that since we're moving quickly. So here's some guidelines. The most important thing is frame your manuscript in terms of contemporary implementation literature. That's usually done in the introduction. It can be done within the research design and method if that's what you're using, but certainly in the conclusions, implications. Ideally, use relevant reporting standards, and there's a number of them identified here. But you don't have to hold to any one of those by any means. Focus on your lessons. It doesn't matter. We can learn from less than success. Let's put it that way. In fact, I think those are more important, honestly, than just where we were successful. Avoid promotional language. We've had some submissions where it was a little bit too much about the entity that was doing what they were doing, and we had to provide that feedback to authors. So be nuanced, be reflective, focus on the implementation implications. Highlight your innovations and new ideas, of course. Basic structure, introduction, setting, methods, results, discussion, implications, lessons. Explicitly state when you submit that it's an applications paper, and if you are clear about whether it's one of the four that we briefly ran through, state what type. That helps us, and if it should get published, we will note it as such. But I think one of the most important things is ground the manuscripts when you have the evidence generated lessons learned. That, of course, may not be in a commentary kind of paper, but basic applications, yes, you're going to have that. Next slide. Here's just a few examples that we pulled, that we've published in the 2 years. And again, you're going to get a copy of this, so you'll be able to pull these out and review them. Case study, retrospective, and commentary. Next slide. And there's some food for thought. Some recent publications that have come out that may cause you to think a little bit differently about implementation science itself, and certainly about its application in practice. Is there another slide I forgot? No, yeah, there's how to submit, yeah. Great, sorry for rushing through that, but we had a lot of folks here, and I want to give us time to answer the specific questions. Someone asked us, right before I turn it over for open discussion, Zach, can you put up that slide about submission guidelines? I'm not slide, the link. Can you open that on screen?
Yes, I can.
So here's submission guidelines on the author submission page. This is Springer's GIRA author submission page.
Here, I'll make that a bit bigger as well. I think it's small for me, and I'm looking at it full screen. So.
Yeah, can you pull out of that, because that's the one that I wanted to open up relative to ChatGPT, because we had an advanced question about that.
Oh, okay.
Just so that they can see what it looks like. There you go. Okay, so this is what the page looks like when you go to submit a manuscript. And on the left-hand side, there's literally instructions for authors, general information, how to submit your manuscript, how to organize it, references, etc., how to set up your tables. Fundamental thing, we use, Springer has us using APA 7. So you want to use APA 7th edition format. I do desk reviews before assigning it to an associate editor for peer review process. And more often than not, the thing that kicks it back to an author is they just haven't paid attention to these guidelines or the APA 7 formatting. So this is a very handy page to have a link to. And now if you go to that title page link, Zach, well, yeah, you can scroll through that just to show them. Yeah, good, perfect. So we had an advanced question about what about the use of LLMs, ChatGPT. Scroll up, please. No, I'm sorry, down. Yeah, there you go. Okay. This is the guidance from Springer. And this is obviously a science that is in motion with multiple ethics questions and wondrous possibilities and dangerous shoals if we're not careful. But for the purposes of answering that question, I wanted to be sure to highlight that. And with that, let's go to the specific questions that you have.
Yeah. Okay.
And associate editors, please jump in. This need not be me alone.
If it's all right, I'm going to put the questions up here just so that we have a visual reference as well. But these are the ones that were submitted in advance of the webinar. I think we just answered this first one about ChatGPT. So we can just go to the next one. Is preprint distribution allowed?
That is also in those guidelines, yes.
Okay, great. We went over the editorial review and screening as well. That was a big part of the presentation. But if the person who asked this question is here now, is there anything that you'd like to clarify about your question? Hearing none, I'm just going to go to the next question. But if you do want to clarify, please feel free to put up your hand.
Well, let me quickly throw in. The review process is, it comes to my desk. I do that initial review. What'll get a kickback to an author is if you didn't pay attention to the guidelines around formatting, etc., and or if it has not been placed in the context of implementation literature. That will get an automatic revise and resubmit with a lot of supportive guidance. It's not just, no, we don't want it. It's, here's what you overlooked and here's the link. And so there's lots of support all the way. Once it gets assigned for review to an associate editor, the associate editor selects reviewers. And that's a challenge these days. Every journal has many, uh, I don't know what the right word is. It's just a frustration trying to get reviewers right now. In the last year or so, it's just been really difficult. We have about 300 some plus and growing database of reviewers. If you would like to be a reviewer for the journal, please let us know. We'd be happy to consider that and invite you to join us in that. But the associate editor invites 2 reviewers. And when they complete their reviews, usually within 14 work days to 21 work days, hopefully, life happens, of course, then the associate editor provides a summary of their recommendations and adds his or her own. It comes back to me. I will add my own, and then if necessary, it goes back to the author. I don't think we've ever had one that hasn't gone back to an author, but that's normal. We go through that process back and forth until it's honed into a very publishable manuscript. Again, it's always supportive commentary. Okay, go on. Sorry, wanted to add that.
No, that's fantastic clarifications there. So great. What common issues do you see that would cause a desk rejection?
Just said it already.
Yep, great. This one has a bit of contextualizing. So currently working on a project to address workforce wellness in a community mental and behavioral health setting. They're using practice and policy feedback loops as a strategy to move data from the workforce-wide survey and feed information about possible.
Yeah, so placed in the context of implementation literature, that could certainly be publishable.
Cool. Great. Absolutely. Is there any way to get assistance, or is there a website that provides support for APA conventions or other formatting kind of concerns?
Yeah, there is. APA 7 there is a website. You can find it online.
I'll find this link.
And there's a link for every type of issue, whether it's your in-text citations, your references, how to format table numbers, headings, all sorts of things.
Thank you, Nancy, for putting that in the chat. Okay, we just had a couple come in through the chat, actually. So what is the publication cost, if any?
None, unless you want it to be open access.
None.
And there are guidelines on open access at the submission process. It's a submission page, I'm sorry.
And then the last question that we had from the chat was, do you accept only implementation and intervention research articles, or are cross-sectional surveys and exploratory articles accepted?
It's hard to answer that. It's got to be in the context of implementation of something.
I mean, we definitely have published cross-sectional analyses.
True. But in the context of implementation.
Yes, in the context of implementation.
And I see BS's question, what does it take to be a reviewer? You can sign up on GIS's website, and I'll include that link in the follow-up emails for everyone that has registered to be here today.
And I think once you get added, I think Springer sends a if you're interested, a link once you're added to the GIRA database of reviewers. I believe Springer sends a link that they've developed for things to look at if you're a reviewer. It's a little bit not implementation focused, but it's more of a classic what does a reviewer do sort of guidance.
And
I would say, I was just thinking that being a reviewer is a really helpful way too, I think, in terms of developing your own paper and seeing what kind of the process, but also what reviewers are looking at and kind of framing your manuscripts.
Great. And there was one more question about what would be considered a case study, but I think you briefly went over that in the presentation. Do you care to elaborate a little bit more, maybe? Like, what are the bounds on a case study, or what would not be a case study?
One of the associate editors take that. I've been talking too much.
What was the question?
When it comes to case studies, like what's the at what point would your observations about work that you're doing become a case study? Like what's the level of rigor? Do you have examples of what would make something a case study as opposed to just like I guess a description of work that went on?
I have not had the experience of editing, being an editor, associate editor on a case study, so I don't think I'm the right person to. I don't know if anybody on the phone has done it.
Yeah,
Our,
it's. Go ahead, Nancy.
I was going to say our intermediary has submitted a few case studies, and
Yeah.
you know, essentially, it's talking about our intermediary organization and the ways in which we apply implementation science to the work that we do. But I can also imagine, you know, some of the topics that folks raised here today in the introduction would be good case studies. So the level of rigor in terms of data is not as high, and the idea is that you're going to kind of spark some learning around implementation science that others doing that kind of work can take away and apply to their own settings.
Right.
This is Sue. Can you hear me okay? I keep getting kind of kicked off and, or so I'm keeping my video off just in hopes that that'll help with my bandwidth issues. But I know I've been the associate editor for at least one, maybe two manuscripts that were more in the case study format. And, you know, the real, what I was really looking for was embedding it within an implementation science framework, or like organizing it in a way that contributes to the implementation science knowledge. You know, just describing what you did is usually not quite sufficient to meet that standard. It has to kind of propel the conversation and what, you know, what did you learn that contributes to the field of implementation science as you're going through your case study review? And when people frame it that way, it's a lot easier, I think, to get through the review process.
Yeah. There's in the PowerPoint when it's sent to you, there's a link to one of the articles that Nancy referenced as being a case study of what an intermediary organization does. And there's always that, go back to that slide where we talked about exactly that, Sue. It shouldn't just be promotional. You know, this is what we do. It's got to be, this is what we tried to do. This is what we did. We thought we accomplished this. We didn't quite get that. And here's where this fits in implementation science and literature. That's the important part. I saw something else that popped up.
Yes, there was one more in the chat that was answered in chat, but I think it's worth reiterating out loud. There's a myth that GIRA only publishes research conducted in healthcare settings. Is that true? What about a school setting?
Oh, of course not. In fact, we purposely set ourselves up as being different than probably the original implementation science journal, Implementation Science, which at the time was, when they started, was very medically focused, health focused. We do publish a lot from health, usually from, I'm thinking there have been a lot from Africa, there have been some from Asia, we've had education studies from Europe. I think we had a couple from the United States. I'm currently working on a project that I definitely want to see published, and I'm hoping we can put it in this journal, with trying to do a school-based system of care for behavioral health. So absolutely, an educational setting would be perfect.
I think that's all the questions from our registration form and from the chat. But are there other questions amongst the group?
I think so. One popped up and then disappeared on my screen just a moment ago.
May you please elaborate on quality improvement projects? Will this be assessed as a case study?
could be essentially a case study, but again, the most important thing is that it be placed in the context of implementation literature and science. That's the most important thing.
And then do you accept only implementation? Oh, wait, that was already asked. So apologies. So if I were an author, I have one question prepared because I definitely wanted to capture this since we are recording this webinar. I have an experience that is, I think, relevant to implementation. There were a lot of lessons learned. What's my first step, or what's my next step for getting the manuscript publication process started? So, like, what should I do if that's my work experience and I want to publish something?
I think one of the things that we have found, especially for individuals who have not had experience publishing and preparing manuscripts, is that it has been helpful to partner with someone who does have that experience, whether you have kind of an academic community partnership or to have someone that's, because the experience is always interesting in terms of publishing wherever. And so I would say that would be one suggestion I would make.
Just as a starting point, that's not bad. It's what I tell my students, write down your experience, let the ideas flow, then worry about organizing them. Don't shut off the mind by constricting it. Write about what you want to write about, read it, have someone else read it. Can they make sense of it? Work with a partner, like Susie said, and then look at the submission guidelines and some of these slides. I think that one slide that talked about a basic organizational framework is very useful.
I would also, I tell people this all the time, is that if you're targeting a certain journal, look at what they're publishing, look at how those articles are set up and the structure of them. You can't copy that, but you can copy the structure and kind of the, and so that's just a good way, I think, to get a sense of what is going through review and being published.
Very practical. Yep. And easy. And you learn in the process.
Absolutely. And to this group in particular, the Global Implementation Society also has staff, so you can reach out to us with anything and we can filter you through to GIRA and say, hey, this is a person who has an idea and would love to get connected. I'm sure GIRA would be able to, help respond to that as well, and maybe even connect you with an individual who could help you shape a manuscript and that kind of thing.
Yes.
I also wanted to circle back to the quality improvement question. It doesn't necessarily have to be a case study. If you've collected quite a bit of data in your approach, and you have more to share about that, it can be a regular article as well. And I know our intermediary has published one in GIRA that was a regular article, and it was a quality improvement study.
Did we answer the question that was posed in the introductions about not having ethics approval?
I don't think we did.
I think we have. My initial reaction is we would look at it and decide. Of course, you never know until you read it. It's not a black and white situation, but we understand that things like that happen. You start with quality improvement, trying to create a tool that has validity, and you had no intentional publication, and then you go, oh wait, this is publishable, but you haven't done the ethics. So if that happened, you could certainly send us a letter, like Zach said, post us, and we'll take it as we see it.
Do we have any other questions from across this group?
Those of you who are looking for networking, that's something else I wanted to speak to. I would encourage you to contact GIS. There are regional networks forming in all different parts of the world, where you'll be able to collaborate with colleagues, share ideas, learn from, they can learn from you.
And with that, before I put any kind of evaluation in the chat, the AEs that are here on the call, are there any last minute, don't want to miss that, kind of thoughts that you have before I pop the evaluation into the chat? Alrighty. Well, there's a link to the evaluation in the chat. If you could please fill that out, that would be hugely helpful to us. Very in line with being in a research journal that we want to collect our own data to improve these processes going forward. So
Right.
Your help there is greatly appreciated.
Best of health, safety. Good luck to all of you.
And thanks again, Rosalind, Nancy, Susie.
Thank you, Zach.
All right.